All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of our Injectables EDU Business Blueprint webinar series. Today, we are doing back to school compliance with our special guest Guardian MD. So, thank you so much for joining us today. Um, if you have any questions, we have a chat box on your screen that you can enter them during the presentation. We are going to try to get into a Q&A session at the end, but we have so much information. We'll do our best to get there. Also, our webinar is being recorded, so you will receive an email with a link to view the recording after the webinar is done, just in case you can't stay for all of it. To keep our lawyers happy, just a few things that we have to let you know. This information provided is intended as general guidance, and we do not replace your specific tax, medical, or legal advice provider. If you do need legal advice, please consult your lawyer. And this is intended to be for educational purposes only, and of course, is copyright material. If you need to take a screenshot to take that in, go ahead and do that now. We won't spend too much time talking about these. Let's get into the good stuff. Like our speakers. Okay, so we have Cassie Lane here with Injectables EDU. Say hi, Cassie. Let's test your microphone.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here talking compliance today.
Yes, we are so happy to have you here. This is going to be a really good session. And of course, where there is Cassie, we have, oh no, we have
this is getting weird, Jason.
oh no. Of course. Here you have Cassie, you have Suzanne. She's supposed to have a slide here, but it's not showing up next. So,
I know my place.
Suzanne,
It's fine.
we know her, we love her. I'm going to give her a little extra love right now to make up for that. She is our co-founder of Injectables EU and the founder of Aura Aesthetics. If you are following our Facebook group online, you see her plenty giving you all of the need to know information about starting your own med spa. Suze, thank you for joining us. And then, and then we have Jason Seitz here. This is our special guest for the day. He is the Vice President of Clinical Operations over at Guardian MD, and he is going to be joining us today to give you guys everything that you need to know about compliance when it comes to starting your own med spa and how to make sure it runs smoothly. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you here today.
No problem. Thanks for having me. And I wouldn't put it past my brother to, just tell me through a webinar that I'm now working with you guys permanently. So
Yeah. Jason, welcome to the Injectables EDU family. It's a great day for all of us. And speaking of all three of you, Injectables EDU and Guardian MD has recently partnered together to offer something that is just so cool and it's going to be so helpful to so many people. It's the Practice Ready bundle. And what you guys have done is taken key aspects from what both of you do and have kind of merged them together for one super package for anyone looking to start their own med spa and just do so in such an easy way. We won't get into the weeds of this too much right now because we are going to talk all about this later, but I just wanted to highlight how excited I am that you guys are doing this Practice Ready bundle. And for those who are staying until the very end, there may or may not be a little giveaway that I think you might be excited to hear about. Ooh.
Yay.
Building the momentum. But
There you
before
go.
we give away the free stuff, let's get into the reason we are all here. So today's topic is back to school compliance. Guardian MD is here to help us sort through everything that we need to know from the compliance aspect. We have a few big questions that we're going to cover today. Let's just jump into the first one. So what I'd love to hear from you guys are what are some of the biggest mistakes that you guys are seeing new aesthetic providers making, both, current day or in the past from your history of doing this?
Suze, I'll let you start with that one.
Yeah, this is a great one because, as you know, Cassie and I offer complimentary calls weekly, and we get to talk to people who want to share with us their idea. Like they have this idea that they want to start a business, whether it's a little, side hustle, whether it becomes a bigger gig and they want to try and work their way out of their current W-2 job and like start a small one-room med spa, or they really will have bigger visions. But what we see over and over again is this idea, and then they start putting money behind it without checking all the rules. And they find out that in some states, it's a bigger lift than it is in other states. And so there's just a real lack of understanding of all the things that you have to navigate in order to even do potentially your little side hustle. Whether it's scope of practice problems, whether it's legal issues, and then we get into the compliance stuff, which everyone kind of is like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's not fine unless you deal with it properly, which is why we partnered with Guardian, and we can, talk more about all those little nitty gritty things that can really, really hold things up if we don't plan for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think we can throw that over to Jason, because I align exactly what Suzanne said, which is sometimes people putting the cart before the horse, and they don't know some of like these really important compliance aspects, like if nurses are not allowed to inject in your state, for example, Florida. And there are some loopholes to that, which is like something where I would look to Guardian to answer and understand some of those loopholes better. But you want to hit some of these high points of like just understanding if you need a medical director, some things like that, maybe before you start picking out your skincare line. And a lot of times we see people just doing these things a little bit backwards. What about you guys, Jason?
Yeah, and I think that's human nature, right? Like we work in the hospital system, we're ready to start our side gig, or we're exploring a new area, and we are familiar with what we know. We're familiar with what we're familiar, you know what I mean? And I think, I'm someone who came from an EMS background and then got into nursing. So things like protocols and scope of practice and compliance were easier for me to wrap my head around, because as an EMS provider, you're acting as a borrowed servant from a physician, and you're acting under these standing orders. So your scope is very clear, and it's written, and you can look it up very quickly. Like, and if you need orders, you can call for online medical direction. It's very different in the nursing field. I don't know about you guys, but I never took a class that said really even what my scope of practice was. I always assumed my scope was the things that I've been trained to do, and there's always physicians around, so I know I'm kind of covered. And if they tell me to do something, they tell me to crack the chest and do a, do a massage of the heart. I guess I can do that because the doctor said it's okay. When we venture out on our own, this becomes a huge, I think, gap in our knowledge that we need to pay attention to. And that's where I think Guardian can help. That's what we seek to do. We're mainly educators, and we try to give you the tools to be able to navigate that complication. Um, but in terms of understanding your scope, we use protocols to really define that and to build that out. But to answer the original question, one of the biggest mistakes I think is assuming that compliance is one and done. So to Suzanne's point, like, yeah, it's this thing that we don't understand. And then I think most nurse providers will say, all right, great. I'll get my little ACLS protocols built out. I'll take these courses, I'll put it in a binder, it's up on the shelf, I never have to touch it again. Right. And it just doesn't work that way, right? Protocols are living documents, consent forms, standing orders, MD signatures, changing in compliance laws to not be plugged into a system or a support system that can help you. Could be a mistake, unless you're a very diligent person in terms of understanding what's kind of going on around you, and that distracts you from your clinical operations, which is what brings you in that income. So I would say assuming compliance is one and done is kind of the biggest mistake that I see. Is sort of like, okay, I know I need to have something in place. This should be good enough. I'm good to go. Or this guy's got it for me. I'm good now. I think recognizing that it's an evolving landscape, scope of practice can even change within states. It is the first thing to kind of wrap your head around, and then you got to shift a little bit to, okay, what is my scope and how do I define that? Um, and like I said, I think protocols is kind of the best way to do that. You don't be working with a medical director or a supervisor that can establish protocols for you and build that compliance relationship so that you're not accepting all of the liability.
I'd also throw out there one more thing that is a major mistake is people taking what other people are doing around them as the way to do something.
Mm.
Not getting professional advice, but because, Susie up the street is doing it, it's okay. I know so and so's doing it. Like that isn't you can't operate like that. It's not, and I always tell people, imagine you're standing in front of a judge and they say, why did you do it this way? And if your answer is because Susie's doing it that way, Does that sound like an answer that you'd like to say? Or did you, oh, I looked up statute such and such in my nursing scope of practice for the state that I live in, and that's why I'm doing it. Oh, that sounds way better than because Susie's doing it, right? So,
Right.
but we hear that a lot. um, or I found out in a Facebook group that I could fill in the blank. Also, not something I'd want to say in front of a judge.
And I think too, using the hospital as an example is a common mistake too, because
Yeah,
hospitals are exempt from a lot of the compliance standards that you would be held to when you're running a PLLC or an LLC. It's very different. That's one of, our biggest frustrations sometimes even over at Guardian is knowing that, someone gets labeled a hospital, it's run by a bunch of business people. It's not run by physicians even, you know what I mean? That but they're exempt from those state laws because they have that hospital designation. So I think using when a lot of our experience comes from us coming up through the hospital and now we're branching out on our own, compare it's apples to oranges really. We can't make
yes,
that comparison. I think it's very common for providers who, hey, I do this in the hospital. I start IVs all day in the hospital, and I support a vent in the hospital. But that doesn't mean you can roll up on a car accident and start an IV or start, pull out your little personal vent and, and start breathing for
yeah,
someone, right? So it's when we take it to those extremes, it's easier to understand. But it is difficult to go from one place that you're working to another place that you're working and realize, hey, your scope changed in the drive over and understanding it's not what you're licensed to do depends on both training, education, and authorization. And that authorization is a really important part. That authorization has to come from another provider. We're just not really told that.
great.
That's really helpful. And what I'm hearing is compliance never ends.
It never ends, and it's always evolving in some way.
And, you guys touched on this a little bit in your last answer, but that brings us to our next question, which is how do I navigate the specific regulations in my state? Cassie, I know that you had mentioned, I think Florida, for example. So what is your advice to people wondering how to best navigate exactly where they are?
Yeah, I'll second that. There's a lot of non-compliance that's happening, in every state. And so, and the funny thing is, I think people take that to mean that people know what they're supposed to do and they're choosing not to do it. It's actually, I think 99% of the time, it's the opposite. It's that people are making some level of attempt at being compliant, but a lot of times it's just not that much of an attempt, right? Like being negligent is definitely not a pass. And to that, I will say it does make a difference to what extent you go to try to be compliant. Like if the nursing board, if you ever have an issue with them, something like that, having a lawyer, showing that you have taken the steps, because a lot of times there is a gray area where maybe it doesn't say yes or no, you can or cannot do that. So try getting with a lawyer and trying or getting all the consultation and guidance you can is kind of the best thing you can do to show that you were doing everything in your power to be compliant. And sometimes in many states, there just isn't a very black and white rule. These things are not accessible, which just also blows my mind. But we get a lot of state specific questions, and it's really hard because it varies very drastically from state to state. And that's why it has been really a mission of ours in Injectables EDU to find somewhere that we can reliably, send our community to feel like they're getting that right information.
Yeah, I think that it can be a frustrating too when we look at even lawyers' opinions on things, I mean, educated opinions on things. You talk to five different lawyers, you get 10 different opinions sometimes, and it can be very frustrating. We use that phrasing quite a bit at Guardian where we say, there's a lot of gray area. And I think people don't understand what we're not saying that we're navigating in this like sketchy area between black and white. It's really just that these boards aren't clear and they don't really know how to even communicate the spirit of what they're saying because that might be in disagreement with another board. We always have the pharmacy board, the nursing board, and the medical board, and sometimes those boards butt heads and they all interpret something a little bit differently. So I think giving yourself grace in that is helpful. I think having a team, like Guardian is helpful too. What we do when we navigate things if there's an issue, I always try to come alongside our clients and let them know, like, hey, you can think of me almost as a little bit of an insurance agent here. Like, I need to know all the details so that we can make sure everything is in order. What we're trying to do is prove to these boards when there's an issue that the spirit of what you were doing, put the patients first and put protecting your licenses, first as well. And I think, that's where, like, if you can, in terms of navigating specific regulations, if you can start at the board of nursing or the medical board, if applicable, that's kind of where you want to go. They should really be the source of truth. Now, you will likely be frustrated with what they give you because they will give you something that is not necessarily comprehensive or black and white, as Cassie said. That's when you can start checking on local layers. Depending on your services, you might have like pharmacy boards, Department of Health, there might be local municipality, there's um, but that's where I think if you have a central repository to hold this information as you gather it, and it can hold living documents, that's super helpful. So one of the things that, like, we strive to do on our platform is keep this central repository for you. So as you find these new layers and as you get more information, you keep adding to that repository to kind of build your compliance model. Um, and we can help you navigate local and state regulations. When there are gray areas, as an example, this might be getting a little in the weeds, but it's fresh in my mind because of some of the compliance changes that we're seeing with telehealth exams and things like that for clearances. Something that we run into a lot. I was just talking to a clinic the other day who said, hey, the board came and said, they don't really love the clearance exams that we're getting because it's referencing a standing order and a protocol, and this is a patient specific Botox treatment. So I need to be able to say this is for Suzanne, this isn't just for the general population. And there's a couple ways we can navigate that depending on the board's comfort level. We can make very specific order sets and protocols and then refer to those protocols and empower providers to be able to use that. Or some boards will say, nope, I want an individual meeting every single time with an advanced provider or a physician that is writing a script for the Botox that is specific to Suzanne's case and says exactly where you're going to inject. And that's fine too. There are ways to navigate that as well. You have an RN on the call with the patient, you have the NPC them together, and you have them give the suggested order set and clear for the service. So it's not a matter of trying to, there's a thousand ways to peel a potato, I suppose you could say. And it really is going to depend on those individual circumstances as you're discussing with the board. So I think viewing board audits and things like that as an opportunity to learn and to set a standard is something that we have to kind of shift in our head too. It's not, the board doesn't want to get you in trouble. That's not their intention. I mean? They want to make sure that the patients are being put first. If the spirit's there 9 times out of 10, we're golden and we have a learning experience and we go from there. So yeah, I mean, I think start with your board of nursing, but give yourself and them some grace. You might get some gray areas there, and that can be frustrating. That's what we deal with all day. So come talk to someone like us, or talk to your local connections, and see how they're navigating different things, so we can kind of build as a community a step towards better compliance and setting that gold standard.
My add on to that would be anything that I ever get from any board, for example, board of nursing, board of pharmacy, whatever it may be, email them so they then email you back and you get it in writing. You want everything in writing, because if somebody on the phone tells you the wrong thing, which is not impossible, you don't have any proof of that, right? If it's in writing, you can say, this is the information I have from the board. I was doing my best. The other thing that can be a great resource can be your nursing organization, like the AANP. The purpose of the AANP, or whatever your form of that, they are there to advocate for your licensure. And like Jason said, the board of nursing, their job has nothing to do with advocating for your licensure. It's all about protecting patients, which is great. That needs to be done, but you need to understand whose purpose is what in all this, right? Who is on your side and what have you.
That's great advice. Cassie, I knew when I saw you taking a note that you were going to come back with something very important.
Yeah, you know me well.
Yes.
I also wrote big star, which is just risk tolerance. And this is something, it's like, if you're going to run your own business, You've got to put your big girl panties on, as they say, because you have to have a certain level of risk tolerance, because there is no way to go about it that you actually even know you're 1000% compliant. That's the practical real life 2 cents. You can let any lawyer come on here and tell you otherwise, but they probably wouldn't, because they wouldn't commit to something that strong anyways. But like there is, I saw Courtney, I was thinking of you when I said that. Um, you have to have some level of risk tolerance to do this, and that's not easy to do. So a little bit of know thyself, but I think entrepreneurship is synonymous for having some level of risk tolerance.
Well, and we have that just in general in practicing medicine, as providers. And I think sometimes maybe we rely almost too heavily on the safety net of our hospital job or our clinic job, thinking, oh, everything's just taken care of here. We're always, assuming risk when we decide to care for another human being. I mean, that's just something that we do. In order to do that empathetically and compassionately, we are held to a standard of care, but like any standard, there's nuance, there's flexibility there. You know what I mean? And a lot of times, when I speak to medic students, a lot of times it's not necessarily what your protocol said or what a previous case with this specific scenario was about. It's what would a prudent medic have done that was in the best interest of their patient. And again, we kind of go back to the spirit of the law. If we can look at these audits as opportunities to challenge the board to say, this is how I'm doing it because this is the best way I can think of to do it that takes care of my patients. What do you think we should do with this? What we find at Guardian a lot of times is that the board ends up adopting the process that we had as their standard moving forward. And that's really Guardian's goal, is to set the standard and to do it the safe and compliant way so that we get out of these areas of gray area and it becomes black and white based on what we built together, as things change. Telemedicine and access to care and more independence for NPs and the need for delegative care, these are all wonderful growing pains and when it comes to the medical industry, because it's important in order to handle our problem with a lack of providers and a more of a focus on functional medicine and self-care and health promotion as opposed to just disease response. So it's not a one size fits all, and we can do our best to come together and establish those standards.
I know we want to move on. I have one clarifying question, Jason, from what you said. When you say audit, is that like a nice word for like investigation, or there's been a complaint filed, or are you speaking about something else?
Yeah, typically they'll use the language audit because they might not necessarily they don't want to have to rely on the fact that they can prove gross negligence where there's damages involved. So they'll use the opportunity to come in and quote unquote audit your clinic to just make sure that you have the compliance documentation there. You don't necessarily need to have a accusation or a legal definition issue for the board to come in and just check in on you. So we try to navigate those with you, and we'll do our own investigation. We'll do our own audits of your current compliance setup so that you're prepared when the board comes in.
Love it.
All right. Here's a big one that I know that you two get all the time. Do I need a medical director?
Oh my goodness, where do we start with that? Again, this is where everyone is responsible for knowing or getting to know what their scope of practice is and what the laws are in their state. And not every state has a rule on this. I will say universally, and I still have this conversation probably weekly with a nurse who says, I just want to start my own practice. And just like we say, there is no state in the United States where a nurse can be their own medical director. You've got to have an LIP, a licensed independent provider. And it varies what level or person that can be from state to state. Sometimes it can be a nurse practitioner. Sometimes it can be a physician. Sometimes it can be an NP, but it can't be a CRNA, right? So there's different rules in every state, and navigating that is exactly why we enlist the help of someone like Guardian and a good attorney who knows the rules and regulations state to state.
Yeah, I think honestly, short answer for this is yes. It's just whether or
Yes,
not your level of licensure can
there you
fit
go.
that medical director role, right? So,
Right,
do I need
exactly.
a medical director? Yes. Am I the
Yes,
medical director? That would be that would be the next
right,
question if you're someone who's an advanced provider that may or may not have independent practice.
correct.
I would say most, if not all states require some sort of physician oversight for aesthetic services, especially injectables, when it comes to like a nurse level provider. Now, there are states that have independent nurse practitioner practice, so that this gives prescriptive authority of some sort and oversight authority to NPs. Typically, in those states, though, those NPs are required to have a physician collaborator that they work under. So there are varying degrees of this. There's essentially RNs typically need a medical director, a physician to oversee them. And this doesn't have to mean that the physician owns their practice. It doesn't have to mean that the physician is in charge of how the day-to-day operations happen at the clinic. It can simply mean there's an established relationship between an MSO through an MSA and a practice so that you can go ahead and sell, buy, trade your business. You can perform and administer the staffing and treatments that the practice is ordering, and the practice is a separate entity. And that's our bread and butter. We work through compliance structures to allow you to, you know, when you get down to brass tacks, own and operate your own business, not have to pay some doctor who's not doing the work 51% of the hard work that you're doing. Um, when it comes to NPs, collaborating physicians are a position we can provide. We do a lot of that where we provide a collaborative physician position and establish a collaborative practice agreement between you and that collaborator so that you can work within your scope and be established in that state. Sometimes there are varying levels of prescriptive authority that you have. So, for instance, if you want to be able to prescribe medications, sometimes it's required that you have a DEA. If you have a DEA, well, then your collaborating physician needs to have a DEA as well. So it doesn't mean that you're going to use that person's license to order meds. It just means that in order to use your license, you need someone collaborating with you. And a lot of this, a lot of what this comes down to is it instead of looking at it as this is something I have to have and it's annoying and I have a babysitter, I hope you guys will see is you have a clinical safety net now. So you have protocols that have to be reviewed. You have chart reviews that have to be signed, and you have another provider at a higher level of licensure that is signing off and saying, yes, I agree. The more people we can say, yes, I agree, the better argument we have when something goes wrong that that our heart was in the right place with the treatment. So really you want that background. You want to be able to collaborate with other advanced providers in order to provide that care. So I think we need to kind of change the mindset a little bit of this medical director, position and looking at it as such a bad thing. You know, we should want medical directors. We should want physicians to weigh in and make us better providers, and we can improve their practice as well through what we teach and learn together.
Perfect.
I think that's helpful. And yes, we love our medical directors out there, even if we are forced to work with them sometimes. If you're a medical director on this line, please don't be offended. And this is our last question before we start getting into the practice ready bundle details. So, just for people who are hoping to start anew and open something of their own, what are your biggest tips for success that you would offer them?
I can start, I guess, on that one. My biggest tip is just being in the Injectables EDU community and having that community. Injectables EDU, the purpose of it is to help you find those people, but it is very it can be very lonely being a business owner, and this is so much more fun and fruitful when you do it with other like-minded people for both the support and the experience pull that they have. And that is, I think you can find that wonderful support system inside of our Injectables EDU community. But wherever you find it, make sure that you have it, because you will not grow as quickly or as successful without that.
Yeah, I would say then hope is not a plan is a line I use all the time. And hoping that it's going to be okay and hoping it's going to work out is just not a long-term play. As we've talked about, there's just lots of things that you need to navigate, and that's why we're here to help.
Yeah, I'd say with that sentiment, like lean on the experts in your industry and lean on each other. There's a tendency as soon as the medical field starts falling more into the business space to see everybody as your competition. And it's just not realistic, guys. There's so much pie out there. Everyone can have a piece of it. And, you're not putting your business or personal finances in jeopardy when you lend a helping hand or attend education with another provider. I think there's a lot of perceived competition out there, and really it's not reasonable to look at it that way. So lean on experts, work together, educate. I think really investing in training and protocols is one of the best things that you can do, and that takes a village. It takes an industry. So using wonderful training programs like Injectables EDU, relying on compliance resources, and going to conferences, getting educated, working with other providers to better yourself. I think is really the key to being successful in this space.
Well said.
You've got to find your people. So we are gonna go past this Q&A. If anyone put in any questions in advance of the webinar or during the chat, we will check and we will follow up and get those answers back to you. But just to let you guys know what our next steps are. So Cassie and Suzanne both mentioned the Injectables EDU community. If you are not already a part of it, you are missing out. It's a great place to share your specific questions or your wins, whatever you need to rally around community for. Injectables EDU is a great place for that. So in our email that we send out when this webinar is done, we will include a link to the re-recording as well as a link to join the Facebook group and just peruse around the Injectables EDU website. We have tons of free resources and we are always putting new ones up there. And we cover state-specific guidance and where to go to get your questions answered and, just what other people are out there that can help you get where you need to go. So check that out. But most importantly, let's talk about a giveaway. I am very excited about this. I know that you guys have been cooking this up for quite some time. So, starting essentially right now, we are going to give away one Practice Ready bundle, which is a brand new offering from Injectables EDU and Guardian MD, a great example of two communities coming together to get people exactly what they need to get where they want to go. I know our Practice Ready bundle is a $3,500 value, and we will be giving away one for free. And both of your organizations played a huge part in this. Cass and Suze, would you mind kicking us off and talking a little bit about the Injectables EDU pieces that are going to be a part of this bundle?
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead,
You
Cass.
you take
Oh, you want me to? All right.
So this is going to be pretty much like our version of your startup package that has that compliance piece as well. So we're including in this bundle, and this is where I honestly feel like anybody and everybody should start when getting into aesthetics. You've got your hands-on comprehensive talks and filler training. Both of those come with like 6.5 hours of online didactic. They're both pre-approved for CME. And then the best part is doing that hands-on class. We've got training centers in Atlanta, Chicago, Richmond, Virginia, Portland, Oregon, Orlando. Did I miss one or I get them all?
That's it.
And then we're going to get you some of this compliance like paperwork. So policies and procedures, templates, dot phrases, meaning like what you actually chart in a patient appointment, and the aesthetics MBA course, which is going to give you next level business information. So the introductory Botox class has business included in it. And this is your additional business information that is at like MBA next level.
That's all so exciting. And I think that brings us to the final piece of this bundle, because it seems like you guys really have those injection techniques and the business expertise included in this bundle. But as we learned in our webinar today, it all boils down to compliance if you want to be successful and making sure you have that buttoned up. And Jason, so Guardian MD, as part of this bundle, is going to be offering a state-specific compliance blueprint. Could you tell us a little bit more about what people can expect with that?
Yeah, so basically you'll receive a form where you'll fill out some information about you and your practice and what state you're in, what locality you're in, and then within about 3 business days, we will send you a customized document that essentially walks you through a blueprint of how we believe that your compliance your compliance infrastructure should be set up. So here's how you should set your business model up. Here's who you should have in place in different positions. Here's the documentation that you should have on hand at any time. And we will adjust that, specifically to you and your state. So we're excited to be able to do that. It's webinars like this where I think the frustration is I know people want to raise their hand and go, well, what about me in my local spot? And like, I can't have that information on hand for you that fast, unfortunately, but we can with a couple days of lead time. So fill this out for us, send it over to us, and let's get the ball rolling for your compliance infrastructure so that you can be confident and comfortable, and just take that yucky feeling out of starting it where you're not quite sure and you don't really have an answer for things and you feel like you're in the gray. No one wants to feel that way. So let's give you, an ultra conservative, safe way to do it for you so that you can be confident and you can focus on what really matters, and that's the client experience and giving good patient care.
Yep. And if
And
there's go ahead, Cassie.
well, I was thinking, out of all the people we talk to on those free 20-minute mentoring calls, I can't tell you how often I hear from people that really like that roadblock is getting the medical director. And it's really like a check the box scenario, but it's a box that you absolutely must check for a lot of people to move forward with this. So that's a place that people can really stall out and not start and not realize their dreams because of this. And so it is great that we do have this Guardian MD resource where it's like, not only do you get that medical director, but you get a ton of help with legal compliance. So I do think that there has been such a need for this in our community, which is nice.
I appreciate that, Cassie. I think if I can shamelessly plug here for a second, I think what makes Guardian unique compared to what I think is sometimes considered our competitors in this space is that we're not just going to match you with a physician. We're not a physician matching services. That's not what we do. We don't just say, here's Dr. Smith, now you figure it out with them. You know what I mean? We are a compliance infrastructure and we are a compliance platform. So we will guide you from A to Z on how to interact with that medical director, how to interact with that collaborating physician. We'll give you a source of truth. We'll give you a platform that you can communicate with them compliantly. We'll give you access to an NP team. We'll give you access to telehealth services if you need clearances. There's a million things that we can do, unique to your practice. So we try to give you the tools that you need to be compliant, not just give you a doctor's name and say, hey, you know what, we'll take a little cut and here's Dr. Smith. He'll figure it out for you from there.
You're almost making it suspiciously easy, the three of you, for someone to start on their own. But I think this is really great. So if you are thinking, I love that, and I especially would love this for free, we will be sending out an email with a link to join the giveaway. You will be able to enter before the rest of the public gets to enter tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox. We are so excited to be able to give this away and essentially watch someone launch their practice with so much ease. I mean, I love how much you guys have laid it out for everyone. And that is really our webinar, you guys. Jason, thank you so much for spending your time with us. I think this was so helpful for everyone to get that compliance information. Cassie, Suze, as always, it was so great to have you guys here. We will be having another webinar soon enough, so please stay tuned and keep an eye out for more updates from Injectables EDU with all the goodies that we've got coming over the fall season.
Yeah. Thanks everybody who showed up
Thank
today.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Take care.
guys. That's our webinar. You have a good one.
Bye-bye.